What is up, YouTube? Welcome to today's video, and I am doing a top 3 league starters. And these are the league starters that I will probably be playing. Now I'm going to choose between one of them. Not really sure which one I'm going to choose. Really comes down to what Vol Venom Gyre is going to be, but for these videos, it's going to be a little bit different in that these league starters are the ones that I think have the best min-max potential. And what I mean by that is a lot of times you look at a list and you're like, wow, Bane Occultist, or you see Seismic Trap, or you see, I don't even know, what's another skill, like Soul Rend or Bone Shatter. For instance, those skills don't really offer the min-max potential that you're going to be looking for. You're not going to want to spend like 100, 200, 300, 400 divines. Now, a lot of that also comes down to how do you actually define your goal early league? Like, what is your goal for the early league? Some people want to do infinite heist, so they want to choose like Toxic Rain Raider because you want move speed, you want phasing. Some people want to farm a Mage Blood, so they just want to do as much mapping as possible, so they want to choose a really good mapper. Some people want to sell boss carries, so they want to choose a really strong bossing build, so they go default to Seismic Trap. Some people want to farm Harvest, and again, you just want some move speed, really fast mapping. Some people want to do the league mechanics, so they just want to play what they want. So my league starter definition, this is not the same for everyone. I want to be able to finish the 4 Void Stones in one day. I think you really want to finish the Void Stones because the Void Stones unlock your farming method. You're able to use Sextants, which is a huge multiplier on the loot that you get. And the build needs to have great endgame scaling. So if I invest like 100 divines or 20 divines or 30 divines, the build needs to be able to keep scaling its DPS. Like the build needs to have 20 mil plus DPS with adequate investment. Now, it also needs to have fast mapping speed. So that's why you won't see Seismic Trap on this list. Now, Seismic Trap is not a slow mapper by any means, but if you compare it to a fast build like EK Ignite, Vortex Ignite, or even Venom Gyre, you'll see that the clear speed kind of lacks a little bit. So in reality, what am I actually looking for? I'm pretty much looking for an all-arounder build that has great scaling into endgame that can pretty much trivialize all content that you throw at it. Now, there's really not that many builds out there that can meet all these criteria. You will see that a lot of builds have really fast mapping speed, but subpar bossing, or a lot of builds might have really good bossing, but subpar mapping speed. It is really hard to find a league starter that fits all these criteria. So a lot of builds also don't have enough move speed in them, and they don't have shield charge. If you ever see a PoB build who's using Flame Dash only and has sub like 80% move speed, you know something is wrong with that build, so probably don't follow it. And lastly, most importantly, try to have fun with your build. Now, I am choosing these builds that have the best min-max potential and can do everything, but you should choose a build that you will enjoy playing. The play style is everything. Like, I know in the past, a lot of people have tried out Ice Trap because they thought it was going to be the best, but they tried it out and they ended up quitting the league because it was terrible. And it was also Expedition League, or people who try to play EA Ballista Totem and then realize it is bad. So let's get straight into the list. So the first build we have here, and boy oh boy is this build a dream. Just look at the amazing clear. You will see explosions for days with this build, and this build is called EK Ignite. Now, this build does level with Wave of Conviction Ignite, which is probably one of the best leveling builds. I did do a practice run earlier on stream that I tried it out, and it progressed the Atlas pretty fast. It was really, really smooth, and it just does a lot of damage. Wave of Conviction. Ignite playstyle is also amazing. You just attack once, you can run around, you can focus on dodging mechanics, and everything pretty much dies around you. And this build, you can switch into Ignite EK. This is probably going to be the #1 question that people tend to have if they do play this build, is that you have to have full fizz to cold conversion with Hatred and probably the gloves. You need fire exposure on hit with your Eldritch Implicit on gloves. You might need Skin of the Loyal, and you will probably need Gloomfane. So the reason why Gloomfane is so good is that it gives you chain +1 times, which helps out a lot of the clear speed. You also have projectiles that have chain gain up to like 40% of non-chaos as extra chaos. So this is huge in terms of the conversion builds because each stage of the conversion gets that extra portion. So this build converts all the fizz to cold, and then the cold gets converted to fire, and both the cold and fire portion gets extra chaos damage. So you can see how that all stacks up and creates this build that does an insane amount of damage. And this build can also reach dot cap DPS with enough investment. So you can see here it's like 29 mil, 30 mil, 35 mil. And it has extremely fast mapping speed even without using shield charge. And I did explore trying to make this build maybe work out with using shield charge. So you use a wand or explode scepter and then you use a shield. And it's actually not bad. The damage I think is very overkill on the bow setup for a lot of cases. And this build is actually probably one of the best simulacrum farmers in the game because of ignite proliferation and coverage. And you can also always decide to play Vortex Ignite with this setup, or you can try to play Maw of Mischief if you really, really want an easy bosser. So now that we've seen this, I just wanted to show you this EK Ignite in Simulacrum. This is probably one of the few builds that I've ever seen that gets like back to back 7 waves on the Simulacrum. Now, for anyone who doesn't really know what that actually means, is Simulacrum, how many waves rewards you get comes down to how fast you kill the mobs and the coverage of your skill. So EK Ignite is really, really good for this because you can pretty much leave down an Ignite Prolif that immediately kills all the mobs as soon as it spawns. And you might be wondering, how is the boss DPS? Because it's an Ignite build. How are you actually going to kill Kosis, especially when there's more monster life? Well, it turns out with Headhunter, this build is actually one of the best scaling Headhunter builds too. And you can see Kosis and Omniphobia pretty much dies to all of the explosion damage and all of the ignite on the ground. And you can see here 7 waves, right? So you might think, oh, this is a fluke. Well, the guy does it again. Next wave, back-to-back 7 waves rewards. You will never really see another build that does this. I have played so many Simulacrum builds. I think Aura Stacker used to be able to do it, but this is the best Simulacrum farmer, hands down, if you wanted to try out a Simulacrum farming build. And wow, like just look how fast the bosses melt. And the best part about this build is definitely how well it scales with Headhunter buffs. And that is definitely something to keep in mind. And you might be wondering, can this build do uber bosses once you get enough damage? And the answer is actually yes. And you can see here, it's not... I mean, this boss, you can't really see how fast the bosses die because there's a lot of phases, but you can see here the damage is more than enough. And you might be thinking, you can't see it's like 4k HP, but you do have Mind Over Matter right here, so you can tank some hits, but overall, it's just a very, very good playstyle. I do think the number one thing that I could see being a problem with this build is definitely the recovery. The recovery is not exactly the best as with most Ignite builds. But overall, this build has insane scale. It has insane mapping. It can do simulacrums. It's probably very good for the league mechanic too. And overall, it's just a joy to play. And I think a lot of people who haven't tried out EK before should give it a shot as people really like it. Now, the second build is the build that I league started last time, and it's Venom Gyre Deadeye. Now, Venom Gyre Deadeye did receive roughly like a 25% damage nerf compared to 3.19, but the damage is pretty much overkill, as most people would know. Now, we also are getting back a Vol Venom Gyre skill. And Vol Venom Gyre should potentially probably be a game changer. It will probably be able to make up some of that 25% damage nerf from Withering Step and Elusive. And even with the Elusive / Nightblade nerf, I do think that Venom Gyre has enough damage to do all the content. Now, it might not be the best league starter right off the bat, but I do think that it's very, very fast to get all 4 Void Stones. Last league, I even sold a bunch of Maven carries, a lot of Uber Elder carries. So you can see the damage is more than enough. I was even able to do 2 or 3 player Maven when doing some of the carries. And it's really just an amazing build for finishing all 4 Void Stones. You might be wondering, is there any real build that maps that much faster than this build? And there's really not. In the SSF Delirium Everywhere event, and this is me right here, second place. I'm a second place Andy, but you can see Venom Gyre actually beat me. Now, the guy did stay awake for a very long time, but he beat me straight up in a SSF event, which is pretty good. Now, so that means that the build doesn't really require that much gear because he's able to do it in SSF, and even with all the nerfs to Harvest, you can see Venom Gyre is still able to pop the F off, and it's going to be even better in mapping. I think that one of the things that people forget is that Arch Nemesis is no longer in the game. So we really want to choose a skill that's super, super fast for mapping. And you can see the reason why this skill is so good for mapping is because you scale all of these projectiles that come out. You get the extra fork, you get the extra chain, you get the extra projectiles from Deadeye. And yeah, this is a great for the league mechanic too, because when you're dodging everything on the ground, when you use Whirling Blades, you'll also be able to do damage. And I think for the league mechanic, we really want to prioritize a build that can do damage while moving. And as you can see, most of these builds I will recommend are very, very good for that. You have what's it called? EK Ignite, which does a lot of ignite damage, and this thing also does a lot of passive damage just from walking around. So you might be wondering, how is this build for bosses? And for Uber bosses, it does it pretty well. It's not exactly the tankiest build in the world, but it can tank some hits. And yeah, I mean, and you might be wondering, like, you also have to kind of know the boss mechanics, so you need to know when you're able to do Whirling Blades. And wow, just look at this. This is pure ecstasy in terms of the MTX. And don't forget, Venom Gyre actually gets an MTX that makes it look a lot better. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, a lot of people might also be considering that this build won't be that popular in terms of like Spectral Helix and Lightning Strike. So I do anticipate that Omniscience will be a lot cheaper because there won't be that many builds that goes for it. So I do think that will be a very, very interesting thing to keep in mind for the budget of this build. Now, next up, we have Cold Dot. And I do think that Cold Dot is probably one of the most underrated builds out there. I think a lot of people kind of don't really understand how much damage you can actually potentially get. Now, this is someone I found doing the leveling experience, and the leveling experience is amazing. I think Cold Dot is probably one of the best leveling builds out there. It requires 0 gear whatsoever, and it's literally a blast to level. Well, it's kind of a chilly blast, if you understand what I mean. Now, this is Ruse Pob. Now, he is the master build maker, as you may all know. And you look at this, 30 mil dot DPS. The biggest misconception about Cold Dot is you can't min-max it to the potential where you can just trivialize all content. And that is what a lot of people tell me. Like, that's honestly what I thought. I thought that Cold Dot couldn't really do Uber bosses easily, but it's just not right. Like, Cold Dot is a really good scaling endgame skill. You scale the skill gem levels, you scale damage over time multiplier. And not to mention, the bossing is a complete joke because of all the chill effect and constant damage over time you have. Now, constant damage over time is way better than what you see on the normal PoB DPS for a lot of builds because it's always active. Even when you're dodging stuff, the boss is still taking damage over time. Now, this is a build that utilizes by stacking a lot of the cold degen skills. So you have Vortex, you have Creeping Frost, and then you also have Cold Snap. Then that all adds up together to create this 30 mil DPS. Now, this build can finish the Void Stone super easily. There's almost 0 gear requirements for this skill. The base damage of the skill is really just that high. People even played this in SSF Hardcore Delhi Everywhere or SSF Mayhem and got first place overall. So you can see these builds that I'm recommending are great in SSF, meaning that they require almost 0 gear whatsoever. And most importantly, you can min-max it so that you can do all the Uber bosses. Now, for here, we can see this is in SSF Hardcore. This is actually on a Hierophant. There are a lot of different Ascendancy choices for this build. You can be, Hierophant for tankiness, Trickster for mapping tankiness, Champion for maximum tankiness. You can also be Elementalist for damage, which is what I would probably recommend in soft core. Or you could even be Occultist if you want some Profane Bloom pops. But you can see here, this is Uber Eater of Worlds. And the boss, even though it seems like it's not going down fast, it's actually dying at a decent rate. Pretty much because the dot DPS is just there. And he actually was able to do all of the bosses, including our fan favorite, Sirius. The worst designed fight in all PoE. But this really just goes to show you that even though the damage doesn't seem insane right off the bat, the consistency of the damage. And that's why Ignite and all of these damage over time skills are so good. And not to mention, they got buffed this patch because of the curse changes. So overall, Cold Dot is the last build that I recommend that have crazy min-max potential and can also map really fast and can also trivialize all content with enough investment. Now, as I said, these builds are all great mappers and have the min-max potential to trivialize all the content you could possibly do with enough investment. They're all uber viable. And they're all top tier, S tier in terms of clear speed. Now, in the end, I do want to stress that you want to choose a league starter that fits your goal. Like, these league starters are definitely the ones that I think that are best all around. So you can pretty much choose whatever you want to do. You can do boss carries, you can do invitation farming, and you can do heist, you can do everything. But if you really want to specialize, you want to choose a certain build, make sure that it actually fits your goal. So if you're choosing Seismic Trap and you want to do some mapping, then it's probably not exactly going to be the best choice. If you're choosing Bone Shatter and you want to do some bossing, probably not the best choice. So if you choose one of these League starters, then it's good. Like Venom Gyre is probably not that great for bossing. It's doable, but there's definitely better choices. But most importantly, make sure you like the playstyle of your build. Playstyle equals king. It doesn't matter how strong Seismic Trap is if you just hate throwing traps. It doesn't really matter how strong EK Ignite is if you just hate damage over time builds. It doesn't really matter how strong Venom Gyre is if you hate using Whirling Blades to do damage. And you should probably try to go look at a video of how the build looks like to play and maybe test it out a little bit if you have a character in Standard or Calandra League still. But thanks for watching, everyone. Let me know down in the comments below what other builds I could have missed that have insane endgame scaling potential and are also great all-arounder League starters. But thanks for watching. I hope you find more Mirrors, Exalted Orbs, and Divines than me. And see you next time. Bye!